Hello, I'm Pandora's Books and welcome back to the channel. What we're doing this week is we're going to be reading witchy books. Since it's October, I thought this would be the perfect time to just binge some good witch content. On the lineup, we've got the cozy fantasy, we've got the historical fiction, and we have got the full-on modern day fantasy of just all the witchy goodness. And I thought I'd bring you along for the journey. So I've started already cozy with my blanket in my PJs, and I'll run you through all the books that we're going to read this week. And I say for the week, but I know for a fact I don't think I'll be able to get through all these books in 1 week. I'm going to try my best. So for our cozy fantasy, we've got The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I'm sure you've heard of this by now. It's on TikTok everywhere. And it's basically just described as this lovely, cozy comfort fantasy read. I don't think it's very heavy fantasy. I think it's very contemporary. And I think this is just a perfect book to get into that autumn cozy vibe. How many times can I say the word cozy? Probably too many in this video. I think this book has a bit of romance in it as well. Can't complain. Always nice to have a bit of romance in a cozy, comfy read. Another book we're going to be tackling this week, The Lost Apothecary. This one's less full-on witch and more just witchy vibes. It's an apothecary, it's poisons, it's potions, it's just very autumn, fall, or autumnal vibes to it, set in 18th century London. I think there's like a murder that happens. I'm excited to try this one out. This one I'm a little bit intimidated by, I think because it's just that historical fiction, but if there's ever a time to start it, it is now. And the last one we're going to tackle is The Crimson Moth, or known in America as Heartless Hunter. This one is the full-on fantasy. It is a duology. The second book isn't out yet, so I will, if I like this book, and I'm really hoping that I do, I will probably reread it in February when the second book comes out. This is Witch Falls for Witch Hunter, classic tale, I guess. I mean, like Vampire Falls for Vampire Slayer, that type of vibe. I have not read a full-on fantasy for a very long time. I am so excited to read this book. I think I'll leave this one for last as like a reward of getting, I don't need to get through the other books, but I'm working towards this book and I'm hoping this is a 5-star read. So let's get into it. I think I'm going to start with The Lost Apothecary first. I'm a bit intimidated by it, but it's just shy of 300 pages, so hopefully it won't take me too long to get through. So let's just jump straight into it. So just as a quick check-in, I'm now on chapter 12 of the book, which is 98 pages in, and I'm really liking it so far. There's a lot of jumping about between present day and past, and we have 3 perspectives so far. So we've been introduced to our present day character called Caroline, I think it was, who is an American who, for her 10th wedding anniversary, has gone to London, but she has just found out that her husband has been cheating on her, so she goes to London by herself, and while she's there she goes on this mudlarking tour, which is like digging through mud in like the river beds in London, and she finds this vial and she becomes really interested and she wants to research the history of it. And then we've also been introduced to Nella, who is in the past in 18th century London, who runs the apothecary shop. She so far seems to be a very interesting character. her background we haven't really delved into yet, not much anyway, not why she's selling poisons and potions to women, because when her mother ran the shop, she was purely just for medicinal, helping women, helping them with in nature's way with herbs and treatments and stuff like that, but she wasn't killing people, and now she is. So I'm assuming we're going to find out the backstory as to why that changed later on. And then we've also got Eliza, who is our third main character, and she's this 12-year-old girl who goes to Nella to get poisons to kill her mistress's husband, as per her mistress's request. So yeah, it's really interesting at the moment, and luckily each perspective and each timeline, both past and present, is interesting, because the risk is when it's dual timelines that one's going to be more interesting than the other. So I'm really glad that when a new perspective starts, I'm not like, oh, I wish I was still with the other person. And if you're wondering where I am, I'm on a work trip at the moment. I've just spent 6 hours driving to get here. And this is the hotel I'm staying in. And so I'm just going to now continue reading, seeing how far I can get through before I just pass out, because I'm just so tired. But I do want to make more of a dent in this. I have, I'm nearly a third of the way through, which is good. But so far, I'm really enjoying this book. So I finally finished The Lost Apothecary. I finished it last night. Stayed up till 1 a.m. reading it, which is not good on a work night, but it was worth it. It took a bit longer than I thought it would to finish it, but that's just because of personal work-life commitments. Otherwise, I think I would have finished this a lot quicker. This was a pleasant surprise. I was very worried that it would be boring, or that the historical element would not work for me, or that I just wouldn't be interested in it. But both storylines, both past and present, were really interesting. Every single perspective in this book is captivating. It keeps you engrossed in the story. And I didn't want to put it down. It was a very enjoyable read. I think this book is less about the apothecary and more about the women in the story. And yes, the apothecary takes a huge part of the book. It is more about the lives of these women and why they do what they do, and just getting in their head, rather than, oh, we're making this poison and then this poison and this happens and I'm going to murder this person. This book was purely just about women and why they do what they do, because of what the men in their lives have done or have pushed them to do. I'm going to give it a 4 stars. I would say 5, but I really keep my 5 stars for just that special book. It just has to have that spark for me. Even if it's a perfect book, I won't give it a 5 stars if it just doesn't have that special thing, that element that gives me 5 stars. So this is a 4 stars. I guess I could give it 4.5 if we're doing half stars. I really did enjoy this book, and I would recommend it to anyone. I had seen some reviews that said, oh, the premise is great, if only it wasn't written by this author. And I don't really agree with that, because I think she did a very good job at writing this premise. There were times where I felt like she was telling instead of showing, but I think it only happened once or twice where it really stood out to me and took me out of the story. But overall, I enjoyed this book. I would read it again in the future, and I'll just recommend it to anyone. So yeah, I gave this a 4 stars. That means I'm ready to start my next book, which is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. With the previous book taking so long, I'm hoping I'll be able to get through this one quicker. It is slightly longer, but I'll probably mix and match with the audiobook so that I can get through this quicker. So it's been a bit since I've updated you. I am now a decent amount in. I forgot to discuss my thoughts at the beginning of the book just because I was so invested in it. I'm now 240 pages in out of 316, so I'm close to the end, and I'm really loving this book. I will say I was expecting more of a focus on the kids and Mika, the main character, looking after the kids and teaching the kids, and there is a lot of that in there. But at the end of the day, this is a romance book. This is a book about Mika and Jamie, the male love interest, getting together, and then the kids are the kids are like a kind of main plot, but mostly side plot. But so far, it is just so wholesome, so cozy, and I'm really enjoying this, and I might finish it tonight, though it is late. So I finally finished The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I just fell in love with this book. Everyone was right. It's very much a cozy fantasy. It is very wholesome. It is very cutesy and very demure, very mindful. I was a bit wary because when people say cozy fantasy, I think of no plot, just vibes, but this definitely does have a plot. It is not just an atmosphere, it's not just vibes of a book. There is something going on, which was my one fear for the book. So I'm glad that there was plot, there was development. All of the main cast are just so lovable. It was wholesome, but not in a cheesy way. It wasn't overdone. It was just the right amount of wholesome. The romance of the book was also very good. It was paced well. It was believable. I felt the chemistry between the two characters. It's just a very feel-good book, and cozy is the perfect word to describe it. I would recommend it. I think I'm going to give it a 4 stars just because it was such a great and fun read, and I got through it very quickly. I think it took me just over a day, considering that I was also working at the same time. I was switching between the audiobook and the physical book so that I could listen to it while I was at work. But it was just a fun read, and I would recommend it. And that means the next book we're reading is The Crimson Moth, which I'm very excited to start. I used to read fantasy a lot as a teenager, and I'll just throw myself into the world and be obsessed with the world that it was set in. So I'm really hoping this reignites my love for fantasy. I'm also matching the cover a little bit. This is the longest book so far. It's 404 pages, so it might take me a little bit longer, but also if I fall in love with it, I'll probably fly through it. I'm just so excited to start this. And I think this one will be the first to have that full magical feeling to it, just because the first book, The Lost Apothecary, wasn't about witches. It was more about potions and brewing, and it had that vibe to it, but there was no magical element to it. And then The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, while it did have magic in it, the focus was more on the found family, the love story, the children that she's working with. Magic is a big part of it, don't get me wrong. It was in a contemporary setting, which is different than being thrown into a fantasy world full of magic. You get a different vibe from it. So I'm really hoping that this book just throws me into the deep end of magic and fantasy. So let's get started on The Crimson Moth. I have finally finished The Crimson Moth. I say finally, I finished it in like a day, less than maybe. This was just such a fun book to read. It was the type of book that while you're in it, you know that you're going to be sad that it's over. And I am just I'm so sad. I'm so annoyed because it's like I have to wait till February now. I have to wait until February 22nd, which is my boyfriend's and I's anniversary. So great anniversary present. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge to Toby. The second book, I think it's called The Rebel Witch. So I can't wait to get my hands on it. And if my words so far do not tell you what I've rated this book, I gave it a 5 stars. This was just such an amazing read. This was the type of book that reminded me of reading fantasies when I was a teenager, of how I would just throw myself into this world and become obsessed with it for, a few days, weeks, and just think about it nonstop. And I wouldn't even say that this world is very complex or the book itself is very complex. I think this book just hit the spot at the right time. I was ready for something new, and I haven't read a fantasy like this in maybe a few years. So I'm just glad I picked this up when I did. This might be my favorite book of the year so far. And I know I just said that in a previous video that I found my favorite book of the year, but it's quickly being replaced by this. This is a 5-star and an amazing way to finish reading witchy books for the month October. And just as a reminder, I read The Lost Apothecary, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and The Crimson Moth, also known as Heartless Hunter in the US. All these books are so widely different, and I think that also helped because I don't think there's any way for me to compare them or say which one's better. Well, I mean, this one's my favorite, but there's no way for me to say which one's better than the other because they all just scratch a different itch, if you know what I mean. The Lost Apothecary, for example, is not a proper fantasy witch book, but it has that full vibe. It has that mystery element. It's, I would say, a good gateway into historical fiction because you still have, you're jumping between the past and the present. And it's just such a fun and interesting read, and I would recommend this book. And then The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches is such a cozy read. It is such just a wholesome, nice, curl up under a blanket read. And when I say cozy, I don't mean no plot. It is just such a nice, feel-good read that's still interesting, that still has character development, that still has feeling to it. If you're in the mood for a romance or if you're in the mood for an easy read that just happens to have witches, I would recommend this book. And then The Crimson Moth is just your perfect fantasy read. It's probably classed as romantasy because there is a romance in this. It is not heavy on the world building, so if that's what puts you off of fantasies, I would say this is a good gateway into fantasy reading. And it's just such a fun read. I really enjoyed it, if you can't tell. So that was all the books I read for this video. If you enjoyed it, please let me know. Leave a like, a comment. If you've read any of these books, let me know. If you love The Crimson Moth as much as I do, please, I need to talk about it with someone. I can't be the only one in my friend group that has read this. I cannot wait until book 2. This is why I don't like reading series before the last book is out, because then I have to wait. I'm just lucky enough that I only have to wait a few months. If I had read this book earlier, I would have to have waited a year. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all those fun YouTube things, and I shall see you guys next time. Bye!